Who could ever forget the racist, fat, pig-ass, crack-smoking mayor from Canada, Rob Ford? Well, he's dead now. He died at only 46 years old, and I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, but this dude was a monster. He didn't just look like a monster, he was a very bad person. I'm gonna read to you what TMZ had to say about it. TMZ wrote, and I quote, "Former Toronto Mayor Rob Ford, who became world famous for his crack scandal while in office, died Tuesday after a battle with cancer," his reps confirmed. Ford was diagnosed with, I'm going to ruin this. I know I'm just going to ruin this. Ford was diagnosed with pleomorphic liposarcoma. Pleomorphic liposarcoma. I think that was the name of my favorite Power Ranger, pleomorphic liposarcoma. Actually, I knew a chick from the hood named pleomorphic liposarcoma. She had a fat ass. Anyway, he was diagnosed with that back in 2014 after a tumor was found in his abdomen. He underwent surgeries and multiple rounds of chemotherapy, but the cancer proved too strong. Ford, who served as mayor from 2010 to 2014, was caught on video smoking crack on multiple occasions during his term. He admitted to using the drug, though denied he was an addict. In 2014, Ford went to rehab to seek help for his, quote, problem with alcohol. And after a 2-month stint, he returned to work to continue his term. He died in Mount Sinai Hospital in Canada, surrounded by his family. Ford is survived by his wife and 2 children. Okay, thanks, TMZ. Thank you for your take on it. So now, let's go back to July 2nd of the year 2014. The Huffington Post Canada posted an article written by Andre Anthony Domis. He wrote, and I quote, "Yesterday, I had an unpleasant encounter with Mayor Rob Ford at Ribfest. I shook his hand and asked him if he was going to apologize for referring to African Canadians as, quote, N-words," and that was with the ERS for the record, "and to community grant programs as, quote, hug a thug programs. The brief exchange ended with him shrugging and saying, 'It's complicated,' before walking away. I wish there was so much more I could have asked Mayor Ford. I wish I could have asked him why he feels that he does more for black youth than the Lions Circle, more than Tropicana Community Services, more than 100 Strong, more than the Black Business Professionals Association. I wish I could have asked him why he takes no responsibility for the wreckage the investigation into his drug transaction has left behind in the Somali community. Why he hasn't looked upon the faces of the men and women forced to the ground by police in the middle of the night and offered an abject apology for helping to bring this down on their heads. I wish I could have asked him why he feels that Jerome Miller, a young, fiercely intelligent, and successful man, would be in jail or dead without his intercession. These and so many more questions, but as Rob turned his broad back on me and walked away, I was left alone to contemplate the futility of asking Rob Ford any questions at all. He doesn't answer them because he doesn't need to, because we don't make him. Ford Nation occupies a space of complete epistemic closure, where the truth is as it comes forth from the lips of Rob Ford. Everything else is either a distraction or an irrelevant item from an inert past. Because I spoke with Rob Ford, I approached a group of African Canadian youth. They were the outside ring of the Ford Nation mob, smiling and cracking jokes to each other, taking up the cheer, "Rob Ford, Rob Ford, Rob Ford." I watched the faces of these young people light up. I watched their sheer glee at being in the presence of a man who had made their reputations more tarnished, their futures more unstable, and their lives more dangerous. It turned my stomach. Let me pause the story right here. This sounds like the people who support Donald Trump, doesn't it? Everything he's saying is making me think about Donald Trump. as I'm reading this. I don't expect Rob Ford to rise to the decorum of his office this late in the game, but it's difficult not to be let down. It's difficult when there are so many African Canadian youth putting in so much effort to get ahead and being offered zero opportunity from their elected representatives. It's difficult when they latch onto Rob Ford as some sort of political Robin Hood and cheer the same man who called himself the most racist guy around. Let me reread that again. It's difficult when they latch on to Rob Ford as some sort of political Robin Hood and cheer the same man who called himself, quote, the most racist guy around. This is the reality of politics in Toronto, where a change in City Hall often means almost nothing at the ground level. Our young people, underemployed and rapidly losing hope, are referred to as, quote, lost and, quote, a waste by their elders. Their elders work themselves well past retirement age, clinging to the vestigial scraps of middle-class status. Our public housing molders and our inadequate transit system leaves many facing an arduous daily commute. To many, the promise of change is false, empty, and dead. I've said before that Rob Ford's ongoing support is not just due to stubborn holdouts unable to let go of their populist grudges. The reality is worse. These supporters, of which many of us can count ourselves, are people who legitimately feel utterly let down by the government. Their support of our disgraced mayor is an unpraised middle finger directed at a political class that, from their point of view, could not care less about their quiet struggle. What saddens me deeply, though, is that Rob Ford doesn't care either. To him, we are a cushion for his ego. He apes our dialects, dances in our street parades, clothes himself in the saintly artifice as our young men's shepherd. When he finds himself back on his heels, he dangles the threat of those young men being turned loose to wreak violence and havoc. And he continues unbaited because too many of us in the African Canadian communities are co-signing his behavior. So the questions I have aren't for Rob Ford. He does not care. My questions are for those of us in the African Canadian communities who continue to support him. 1. If your teenage son or daughter behaved in the way Mr. Ford has behaved, would you be okay with that? And what would you say to them? 2. Given that he has already taken advantage of us, co-opted our culture, put money from his own pocket into the hands of drug dealers, called your sons, quote, thugs, called the rest of us N-words, and reduced his destructive, sociopathic behavior to a problem with weight and alcohol, what would it take for Rob Ford to finally lose your support? 3. If we are not being adequately represented at City Hall, why has there not been any organized effort to groom and support candidates who will do so? You have just under 4 months before the answer has a very real chance of becoming moot. Because please do not consider the fact that there are some of us from the, quote, lost generation, myself included, are working very hard to provide better representation for all communities in City Hall. We are doing our part. We cannot do it without your help. A final question, and be very honest. When this election is over, would you rather remember yourself for being motivated by revenge against the political establishment, or by hope that our young men and women will be up to the task of shaping Toronto's future? We await your answer. End quote. So that's what he wrote, man. And thank you for that, Mr. Andre Anthony Dumis. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. My whole point of reading that article to you guys was this. Now, I understand that Mr. Ford is now deceased at only 46 and he died of cancer. Okay, I get it. But let's not forget what type of person he was when he was in office. I mean, this guy was a handful. And I'm not just talking about his stomach, because that was several handfuls. I mean, this guy was a bastard. He was a racist, sick, twisted, deluded man. And, you know, I could say that Toronto is better without him being the mayor, but somebody much worse might be there to replace him. All I know is he sounds a hell of a lot like Donald Trump. If you really listen to everything that man was saying, it's just the same thing. Same situation, just a different place. These people are something else. You can't tell me that they're not all connected. You can't tell me that they aren't in those little groups, those little corny fraternities and whatnot. You just can't convince me that that's not what's going on here. Because we see the same shit in different places taking place. And it has to be the same people. You know, even if the ideologies are a little bit different, they have one thing on their agenda, and that's white supremacy. And when I say white supremacy, I mean white, rich, old money male supremacy. Now, they may give some scraps to some other white people, particularly some white men that they select that will clean up some dirty work for them and whatnot, some janitors. But for the most part, old, white, male, wealth, and power. Just being exchanged from hand to hand, handed on down. Already sitting there and just waiting to be used. And it's always used in a corrupted manner. You know? They hurt and kill so many people. And they just keep getting away with it for now. But I have a lot of faith that very soon people are going to come together and figure out what needs to be done. And I'm not talking about some physical pseudo revolution, war in the streets or anything stupid like that. I'm talking about like a mental strategy. I think that people were just going to come together and say, you know what? We got to do it. Let's do it. And then they're going to actually get it done. And I think the dynamics of this planet could be changed forever. And the world could be pushed into a more positive direction. Only time will tell, but for what I've seen, people are waking up at a speed that they can't stop. So now that they're out here just doing more random terrorist attacks, just people bombing stuff and whatnot, people that work for these different governments and groups, the secret handshake and password clowns, seems like they're back at it again. They're bombing people all around the world to try to scare them. But I don't think it's going to work. I don't think people are going to be scared into submission much longer. I think people are actually going to fight back. You know what they say, you know, you push somebody into the corner, they come out more than swinging. They come out with the damn vengeance. Like they have something to prove. I think they bit off more than they can chew. And I think that pretty soon we're going to see more situations where people who are known racist bastards like Rob Ford are just going to pop up dead from cancer or a multitude of different things, drug overdoses, AIDS. You know, you could say that it's karma coming back to get them or however you want to word it. All I know is this: I have all of the faith in the world that these people are going to be stopped. I mean, I've just seen too many signs and I feel it. I just know that something is going to happen. And this big thing that's going to happen is going to be a game changer. And it won't be the second coming of Jesus. It won't be anything like that. It won't be a physical war in the streets that's going to change it. I really do think there's going to be a mental change. I think people who would have never normally worked together are going to come together, whether it's the Nation of Islam and the Nazis. Whatever it'll be, it's going to be a sight to be beheld, like the gangs and police officers. Whatever it's going to be, people are going to say, you know, we're tired of the poverty. We're tired of the bloodshed. We're tired of there being cures for certain diseases that they just don't want to release. Sooner or later, people are going to wake up, figure out who's causing the trouble, and take out the trash. But this is just my opinion. Let me know what you think about it all below. Be sure to subscribe to the Meat Magazine YouTube channels. Visit meatmagazine.blogspot.com. Follow me on Twitter at Meat Magazine. All I know is that Rob Ford was a very bad man, and he was surely a part of the problem. He was surely consciously a part of the movement to destroy people. There's no way he could have been doing the stuff he was doing when he was in office. He was a crack smoking racist. And this is why we need to not just buy politicians. We need to create them. We need to groom them from the time they're children. Meat Magazine.